start with a small story. It goes, one day, an old man was walking along the beach. It was littered with thousands of starfish that had been washed ashore by the high tide. As he walked, he came upon a young boy who was eagerly throwing the starfish back into the ocean, one by one. Puzzled, the man looked at the boy and asked, "What are you doing?" Without looking up from his task, the boy replied, "The tide has washed them onto the beach, and they cannot return to the sea by themselves. When the sun gets high, they will die, unless they are thrown back into the water." The old man chuckled aloud. "Son, there are thousands of starfish, and only one of you. I'm afraid you won't really make that much of a difference." The boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and gently tossed it back into the ocean. Then he turned to the old man and said, "But it made a difference to that one." For most of you who know, I have dedicated my life to service. It's something that I was called to do. I felt that I was called to do when I was 16. We had just come back from a mission trip to Mexico, and while everybody else was talking about how soon they could get to Taco Bell for some real food, or how quickly they could get into a hot shower, the only thing that I could think of was, when can I do this again? How long before I can do something like this again? And God, at that time, God had placed in my heart that I was to go overseas to do mission work. I come from a family that is very mission-oriented. My aunt and uncle are missionaries in Rwanda. They've lived in Rwanda and Kenya for most of my cousins' lives. And my aunt was my Sabbath school teacher in federal through primary. My mom used to drive all of us from Alhambra, from San Gabriel to Alhambra on Wednesday afternoons for children's choir and Pathfinders. And so I've grown up with a mission-oriented family. And because of that, I believe it has shaped how I've been able to view the world, how God has used me. And so over the last 20 years, I have been blessed. God has blessed me so much with the ability to go not only overseas, but to help here locally. And every time I come home, I am humbled and struck again by how fortunate I am to live in a country that has running water, in a country where we are free to worship as we please. We are able to gather here in public without fear of persecution. And there are so many in this world that don't have that luxury. I have a roof over my head. I have food in my fridge. And I have a God that loves me so much, He wants me to help spread that love to everyone that I meet. My faith is renewed, and I am able to end the day with joy in my heart. Helping people makes me happy. And as I've told many of you, is a mini vacation from what the rest of the week is like. And the reason I say it's a mini vacation is because during the 3 hours that I spend on Skid Row every Thursday night, it's not about me. It is ministering to those in need. It's helping them get warm food in their bellies. It's giving them hope, a smile, a hug, letting them know that they are not alone. And even, especially when I get done with Skid Row. So the word serve is mentioned 279 times in the Bible, and the word service is mentioned 132 times. To minister is to serve, and to serve is to minister. Jesus demonstrated that spiritual ministry and practical mission are not as far apart as we sometimes assume. For Jesus and his disciples, caring for people physically and practically were at least part of caring for them spiritually. Good news to the poor, freedom for the oppressed, and healing for the broken were proclaimed as markers of the Messiah, and something Jesus demonstrated throughout his ministry. Jesus, the Son of God, never placed himself in a position above others. He led by serving, and he loved by serving. He washed feet, and he fed thousands. He stopped to touch and heal a sick woman, and went to raise his friend Lazarus from the dead. He spent time with those no one else cared to spend time with. Jesus lived a life of humility. To be a servant means we genuinely need to care about people. It is keeping our eyes, hearts, and schedules open for divine appointments. At this time, I'd like to invite all of you to please turn to Matthew 5, verses 13 to 16. Jesus urged his disciples to be salt and light in the world. When used appropriately, salt and light are to make a difference in the contexts in which they are added. Salt brings out flavors as well as preserves the food it is added to. It is symbolic of the good that we should be for those around us. Similarly, light pushes back the darkness, revealing obstacles and hazards, making a house or city safer and providing a point to navigate there, even when some distance away. Like a light on a dark night, Jesus said, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Both of these salt and light symbols point us to our responsibility as disciples to influence and improve the life of those around us. Christ also showed us that serving others and humility go hand in hand. So if you would like to turn with me to Luke 22, 25 through 27, which is a verse that Colleen read this morning. No task was ever beneath Jesus, and no person was ever unworthy. During the Last Supper, while Jesus prepared for his ultimate act of service to humanity, his disciples argued over who among them would be the greatest. Jesus' response was unexpected. Jesus said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves." And what he did next put them to shame. He knelt before each man and served him. He, who in a matter of hours would free us from the bondage of death and cleanse us and them with his blood, first cleaned their feet, a task reserved for the household servants. He then told them, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you." And we find that in John 13, verses 14 and 15. At this time, I would like to invite all of you to please turn to Luke 10. And we are going to study a bit the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus was questioned by a lawyer who wanted to know what to do to inherit eternal life. Jesus asked the man to interpret the law as he understood it. The lawyer quoted, "To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind." When questioned, Jesus often concluded his answers with an outcome quite different from what the questioner was seeking. In response to the instructions in Leviticus 19:18 to love your neighbor as yourself, it seemed many of the religious people had spent too much time debating the parameters of the neighbor principle. Jesus had already sought to expand his followers' understanding of this term neighbor, urging that not only should they love them, but that they should do good to everyone. But when an expert in religious law tried to justify himself, he challenged Jesus with, "Who is my neighbor?" In response, Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan, but the ultimate response to the lawyer's question was not to define who his neighbor was. Instead, Jesus told the man to be a neighbor to anyone who needed help. As was common in Jesus' teaching, his harshest criticism was aimed at those who claimed to be religious but showed little concern for the suffering of others. He pointed to an outsider, someone considered unfaithful to God, to demonstrate what the call of God is to all who claim to be his followers. Like his first hearers, when we come to Jesus asking what we need to do to inherit eternal life, he ultimately instructs us to go and to be a neighbor to anyone in need. God created us not to live for ourselves, but to be a blessing to others. A life of self-centeredness will lose its meaning, will lose its purpose and its value. Life is about fulfilling God's purpose in this world. Ellen White commented once that love and loyalty to Christ are the spring of all true service. In the heart touched by his love, there is begotten a desire to work for him. Let this desire be encouraged and rightly guided. Whether in the home, the neighborhood, or the school, the presence of the poor, the afflicted, the ignorant, or the unfortunate should be regarded not as a misfortune, but as affording precious opportunity for service. And that's found in Education, page 268. Service for me is an outward expression of my love for Christ. Jesus lived a life of caring and service. Because Jesus loved, he cared, and he just had to help. Jesus' service was always centered in compassion and sympathy. His interactions with others, his healing miracles, and many of his parables demonstrated and urged that a life lived in such a way was the best way to express true devotion to God. Perhaps Jesus' most frightening sermon, particularly for religious people, is found in Matthew 23. Not only did Jesus describe the religion as not helping people who are disadvantaged in life, he considered such religion as adding to their burdens. By their actions, or at times their lack thereof, Jesus said, they shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. And we find that verse in Matthew 23:13. At this time, I would like to invite our youth to come up, and we're going to have a little bit of interaction. So during this week, I texted everybody and I asked them to think about a time that they have done any type of either community service or any type of mission, whether it's locally or abroad. And I gave them 4 questions to think about while they were preparing what they were going to talk about. So the first one was, share a time you served your community, either through a mission trip or community service. 2, what did you learn about the people and the community in the area where you served? 3, what did you learn about God's purpose for your life? And 4, do you have any experiences where you saw God at work while you were on your mission, or special stories of miracles? So I'm going to start with Pauline.
God is so good. I recently realized how truly blessed I am. Not only do I have access to an education, but I have a loving, supporting family, good friends, a roof over my head, food to eat, and so much more. I've shut out the problems of the world so much that I've lost sight of the tragedies going on. It is sad to think that kids all over the world do not have access to an education that is ever so rightly deserved. Late 2019, I decided to join a club at my school. This organization is called TASSEL, which stands for Teaching and Sharing Skills to Enrich Lives, which runs English learning classes in Cambodia. My job is to write grammar of paragraphs of kids ranging from ages 15 to 17 and give pointers on how to improve their English. I can honestly quite say I did not realize that English is such a hard language to learn from scratch, especially when it is your second language. I've only been doing this for a couple of months, but I've learned a lot so far about myself, society, and God. With me, I've learned that one of my gifts is to help others in need. Whether it be tutoring or correcting these paragraphs, I know that the work I am doing is creating a bigger picture for these individuals' lives in the future. Society constantly tries to bring everyone down, causing chaos, wars, famine, inhibiting individuals from what they need. With this, we need more people to use their God-given gifts to help those who are struggling. God provides each and every one of us with gifts so we can help spread the goodness and grace of what God constantly does for us. Not only through this program, but all the other volunteering that I've done, my eyes have been opened to the reality of this world. I've realized that I need to make a change in this world, even if it starts off as being little. God uses each and every one of us in different ways. The way God uses me is helping others and being there for those who are struggling.
Alright, so we're going to do a little bit of a question and answer. So if anybody would like to share a time you served your community, either through a mission trip or community service.
Hey guys, my name is Kimmy, and I've been on a few mission trips in my lifetime. I've been to Mexico multiple times, I've been to Switzerland, but I think one of the most impactful ones is when I went to Mexico. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school, and we went with my church group, which was in Whittier. We went as a high school group, and for years, my church has been going to this, I forget what the name of the town is, but we've been going to this town for who knows how long, and they always expect us each Christmas break because we bring them different, like, I don't know if you've heard of the VBS, it's like a vacation Bible school for children, and we bring them a vacation Bible school. I do, when I did the mission trips, I did sports, so I helped them play soccer, or I just did games and stuff, and I think what I learned about the community in the area I served is that they're obviously not as fortunate as us, and it was really impactful. Being 12 years old, you're not really exposed to much, especially you're just in your own little bubble, and I found that going there, that I was a lot more appreciative of what I have, especially my family, who is very active in the church, and then also my friends, who also are very privileged as well. I also learned God's purpose for my life, which is I like to serve with children. I don't know if you noticed today, but I like to serve with children. I did that on a couple more mission trips that I did. I served with children there as well, but I found that I work well with children usually. I feel like I relate to them a little bit more. I do have kind of a childish personality, but I have grown up a little bit more in the past 8 years. But I think when I worked in Mexico, I saw many different things, but I think one of the most impactful was seeing my peers and how they worked through the mission trip and how they felt that their talents could be used. And I think that was really impactful for me because I felt I'm not alone in seeing that they're obviously not as privileged as us, but I feel like they just wanted to play with them, and they just wanted to make them feel welcome and feel like they could have a place where they feel comfortable. And that was with us. And at the end of the mission trip, we always had like a gathering where one of the towns, she's like a mother for the whole town. She made this soup for us. It was really spicy, but it was still really good. And she has stuff that she sells, like blankets that she made. And it was just really cool. I still have that blanket today. And I think just seeing my peers along with me, just acting like a family with the rest of the kids in Mexico was just really impactful. Thank you.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
So I'm going to be talking to you guys about a community service opportunity that I got. The organization was Children's Sucker Fund, and through this organization we package food and send it to areas that are not as privileged as we are. And so what we would do, or what I would do, is I would work in a line basically and separate food that was able to be distributed and food that wasn't. And I would also package it inside a box, and then that box would later be shipped to a specific area. What I learned about this was that, again, there's not many people that are as privileged as we are today. A lot of people are struggling to have food in their homes. So being able to be a part of this group, I was able to help out these people that, they were praying for someone to help them or for food to come into their house. And just being a part of that, it showed me that God uses me as service to help other people, no matter who they are or where they are. These people were across the country or out of the country, and I was able to help them, not directly being there, but indirectly by packaging the food and then shipping that out. So I thought that was a great opportunity for me. It really showed me a lot about who I am as a person.
Hello, good morning. So I'm going to be talking about the mission trip that I went on, which was the Unity for Orphans. And our church was invited to go with another group down to Tijuana to spend time with these orphaned children and to to see the situation and to send them supplies so that they could keep on living where they were at. And I was in 7th grade at the time, and I remember when we went down to San Diego to meet up with the group to go down to Tijuana, and I was nervous because it was a different place and a different territory and an area that I was going to, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I was thinking the worst. I was like, what if, if something happens bad, or like, just, my head was going to bad places when we were crossing the border. So I was like, it's fine, Jesus is with me, we're going to be fine. So when we get down there, it was incredible because all these kids, they were just, like, when you think about it, they're by themselves and they're abandoned either by their parents or people who couldn't take care of them. And the shocking thing for me was to see how happy each one of the kids were when we were there with the supplies and food and clothes for them, and the amount of affection they were giving us. And I felt like I was the one who was supposed to be giving them the love and affection and attention that they needed, but it was like almost reverse. Like they were coming up to us and giving us hugs, and I got to spend time with this one little girl. Her name was Dulce, and I was absolutely blessed. She was the sweetest girl I've ever met. And I'm not really that good with kids, so I was so nervous to be hanging out with her, but she opened up that side of me where I got to talk to her, and the language barrier was pretty bad. But it was like she understood me and I understood her. It was the coolest thing that I've ever experienced. And what I learned about the people in community in the area where I served was that they have not nothing, but they're living on so little, and they're still so happy to be in the company of each other and in the company that we bring to them. And I was completely blessed. And God's purpose in my life, where I realized that I love helping people, whether it not be in the way of like mission trip wise, but it got me thinking about helping in my area and community and my occupation in the future. And that's where I got to think about like the medical side, where I was like, I can help people like if they're having problems and stuff, like medically or health-wise, and it started taking me down that path, which I am on now in these next few years of my life, which I am super excited for. And any experiences where I saw God at work while I was on my mission trip was with that special girl, Dulce, where it was just, she was the light that I needed at that time, and the mission trip opened my eyes to see that I am so blessed, like what Michelle said, to be living in a country where I have a roof over my head, warm food, clothes, a family that loves me and appreciates me, and friends around me that give me time.
So if you know me, I like serving, whether it be helping Carlos out with baby, or at school, like in band or chorale, or for sports teams and volleyball. It's fun. But 2 years ago, the school was planning a trip to Puerto Rico. If you know about Puerto Rico, they've been suffering like hurricanes, earthquakes and such. But it was canceled because they were grounding the MAX jets or whatever for Southwest. This year, our religion teacher, Pastor Ben, came up to me and said, "Hey Jack, you want to come on a mission trip to Puerto Rico?" And I was like, "Okay, Ben, come on." But eventually, friends were like, "It's gonna be fun, it's gonna be fun." So I decided to go. When we were at the airport, I really had the mentality of, going and like helping. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna have fun, it's gonna be awesome, big memories. But it really hit me when I got there and saw like the conditions people were living in and stuff like that. So yeah, we got there the next day. We were sent to go do construction on a family's house. And we got there and we decided, all they wanted us to do was paint the house. So we painted the house. It's kind of sad because I really wanted to hammer stuff or something like that. It already was painted. But how happy the family was really got to me. Like, we didn't do that much, but they were happy that we were there just helping them out. And that really got to me. Yeah, like Juliana said, we have so much here in America that sometimes we take it for granted. But, yeah, no, it really opened my eyes. I love serving.
I haven't really done mission trips, but I have helped with homeless and I've wrapped gifts for those who don't have as much. It really opens my eyes because I realize how much I have and how much I'm blessed with, because there are others who don't have as much. And there are those who are blessed with so much, and it just, sometimes we're so distracted with the latest trends or the newest clothes that we can have, and they're struggling to have clothes and food. And it's really emotional because you realize how much you have, and God works through us and how He blesses us. And some of these homeless people, they don't think that anyone loves them or that there's anyone there for them, but God's there keeping them alive and keeping them with strong arms. And just seeing them smile brings a big impact. It makes me feel better because they're still happy, even though they don't have a home or have as much as we do, how many resources they have. Because we have technology, we have iPhones, we have computers, we have a school, we have safe schools, and they don't even get to really learn much. And it's just important to keep God in your life, because when you get greedy and selfish, you tend to forget about God and how He does so much for us and how He died for us and sacrificed His own life. And it's just really emotional. Yeah.
So I just wanted to share a couple of stories really quick. These kids are so blessed. I'm in awe by what they have shared with you this morning. One of my first overseas trips, we went to the Republic of Georgia, and we had a layover in Istanbul, and so we decided to do a little bit of sightseeing because we had some time, and who doesn't want to go sightseeing in Istanbul? We leave, we get to the border between Turkey and Georgia, and we realize that we were supposed to have gotten our visas in Istanbul. We are a plane ride and a 4-hour car ride away from where we need to be. And we are 5 people who don't speak Turkish, we don't speak Georgian, and we haven't slept in 5 days, we don't smell the best. And we are wondering, Sabbath is coming, and we are wondering, how are we supposed to get in? So we prayed. We spent the night on this tiny little, what they call the DMZ, it's a demilitarized zone, so you're not in any one country. We needed armed escorts to use the facilities, and we decided, okay, we're here, God must have a reason for us being here. So we start the Sabbath with praise and worship. Our youth pastor had brought his guitar with us, and so as the buses are entering and leaving the country, they see 5 Americans sitting on this concrete block singing. And it's 16 hours later, we still have no idea what to do. The pastor has come and he's asked us, well, what can we do to help you? And so we explained the situation, and he said, okay, let me see if I can take care of it. So he went, and we had been praying this entire time. God had worked it out so that a friend of the pastor's who did visas, who made visas, happened to be sick that day. So he, by the grace of God, was able to get us emergency humanitarian visas to get into the country. Meanwhile, we're still sitting on these concrete blocks, and it's very overcast, much like it is this morning. And we have all of our vacation Bible school supplies, all of our luggage is sitting out, and we are desperately praying that God will hold the floodgates until we can find shelter. As soon as the last piece of Vacation Bible School supplies went into the car and the door was closed, it started to pour. And so it was during that trip that I realized that God is in everything that we do. He supplies our needs before we even have a need. Who knew that the man that would be responsible for getting us into the country would be sick that day? And one more story to share with you guys. Most of you know that I spend most of my Thursday nights down on the Skid Row. I know it's not the safest place to be, but there is a need down there, and that's what God has called me to do. I can't do the overseas mission like I had originally intended to do, but God has opened up doors for me locally. And so about a year ago, we were downtown, and there was a lady who was in the group, was looking for food, and she was just yelling at everybody, and was just very angry at the world. And she tells one of the guys, "What group are you with?" And he said, we're not with any church group or anything like that. And she's going on about how, I bet none of you even know who God is, or none of you believe in God. And most of you know I don't like confrontation. It is not my thing. And if there is any reasonable place to duck and hide, that is where I will be. But for some reason, my mouth separated from my brain, and as this lady is about 5 feet away from me and she's yelling at everybody, I bet you there's nobody in this group that even believes in God. I hear myself saying, I believe in God. And I stopped, and I looked around, and I thought to myself, that wasn't me that just said that. I don't do that. And she turns to me and she says, what did you just say? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm already in this. There's no going back now. And so I looked her full in the face and I said, I believe in God. She stops, she looks at me, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, tonight is the night I die. God has called me home, it's time. And she turns to me and she says, can I give you a hug? Which is completely what I was not expecting. And oftentimes we go down, we do our mission trips, we do our community service thinking that we are going to be the blessing to others. And God always works it out that we are the ones that end up being blessed. And so, as I would like to finish, these days, this is my mission field, the people standing behind me, these young adults who are this generation of church leaders. God did not call me to help those in foreign countries. Instead, He called me to minister in my own backyard. It is not a glamorous lifestyle, but if I am to follow Christ's example, neither was His ministry. It is meeting people at their worst, in the pit of their despair, and pointing the way to the Master. Oftentimes, using the gifts God has entrusted to us to share with others puts us in uncomfortable situations, so far outside our comfort zones that we think we're either not capable or that someone else would be better equipped. But part of humility is knowing that we are not called to serve on our own merit or our own strength. It is allowing the Holy Spirit to work through us to be a love to someone in desperate need. It is seeing a tiny spark of light come back into the eyes of someone who cannot see through the dark. The Christian call is to be the hands and feet of Jesus on earth, because there is nothing more satisfying than to watch someone who has been lost find his or her way back to the open arms of the Father. When we leave our comfort zone, step out in faith, and behave like the Good Samaritan, we can hear the words of Jesus. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me. And that's found in Matthew 25:40. For those of you, one last story, who don't know me very well, I love music. We're up here every other week, and for me, there is nothing greater to praise God with than through song. And so I was listening to my Christian play mix this week, trying to find inspiration on what to talk about. I came across a song. It's an old song by Ray Boltz, and it's called Thank You. And in the chorus, it says, I just wanted to read to you before I close. It says, thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. Thank you.